Story 1. A warning. My husband's job had transferred him from New Hampshire to Georgia. He was to be on a 5-day shift. 5 days on, 5 days off. That meant he would not be home except every other week. He was a truck driver for a major store chain. After being there a month or so, we decided that it was a great little town to settle down in. We started looking for a house. During this time, we had no incidents in our apartment. After another 2 months of searching, we finally found a house we wanted. We put in a contract on it. It was a 3-bedroom ranch with a small in-ground pool, located in a more rural part of the city. Our offer was accepted, and we were ecstatic. This is when things changed. Our 4-year-old son began falling out of bed, almost every night. He had never done this before. Eventually, this led him to waking up in the middle of the night, and I would have to go in and comfort him. It was usually fairly easy to do, and he'd go back to sleep, only to wake up again later on in the night. When I put them to bed, I would sit in the hallway between both their doors. Our daughter's bedroom was at the end of the hall, and the hall was about 10 feet long, but their doors were close together. I would have all the lights off except the hallway, and once they were asleep, I'd then go and get on the computer in the dining room, which was directly adjacent to the hallway. The hallway had a bathroom at the opposite end from the bedroom, near our laundry room. One night my son insisted I lay with him in bed. My eyes were closed and we were both resting quietly, when suddenly he half sat up in bed and said, "Who is that?" Naturally, I asked, "What do you mean?" He said that a woman in a long skirt had just walked by his bedroom door, headed to his sister's room. Of course, this was one of the weeks that my husband was gone, so I was all alone in the apartment, thinking someone must have broken into our second-floor apartment. I got up and I looked. Our daughter was sound asleep. I checked the closet, under her bed, everywhere I could think of. There was no one else in the house but us. I questioned my son again, and he said that he absolutely saw someone walk past his door. I brought both my kids to sleep in my bed on the other side of the apartment that night. Another night, I sat in the hallway again until they were both sound asleep. All the lights were off except the hall light. When they were both sound asleep, I got up, used their bathroom at the end of the hall. While in there, I heard what sounded like a toy hitting the wall in my son's closet. That wall is shared with the bathroom. Thinking he woke up and started playing, I went into his room to find him sleeping cozily in his bed. But the closet door was halfway open and the light inside was on. I'm a little freaked out at this point because I know I had closed the door and I know the light was off. I gathered up both kids and I took them to my room again. Another night. My husband's home this time. We're all asleep in our own beds. I wake up to hear my son sobbing. Naturally, I go to comfort him, and he's not there. He's not in his room. My husband and I search everywhere, and we can't find him. We can hear him sobbing, crying. After a little while, we find him hiding under the sink in the bathroom at the end of the hallway. He told us that the mean lady won't let him pass. He had tried to come to our room, but she stood in front of him. He described her exactly as he had the night he saw someone walk into his sister's room. Long skirt, hair up behind her. He said she makes faces at him. All the while, my daughter says that she's never seen anything out of the ordinary or experienced anything paranormal in the apartment. One night I'm sleeping, and I have the most vivid dream I've ever dreamed. We're in the house that we're under contract for, and I'm looking for my son, and I find him floating face down in the pool. He's drowned. I wake up crying. I made up my mind then and there. There was no way I was ever moving into that house. Now I just have to convince my husband, who thinks I'm crazy and is determined to get that house. But in the end, something happened, and the loan fell through with the house we were going to buy. And mysteriously, everything stopped. No more rattling of this or that. No more shadows. No more mysterious woman walking through the house terrorizing my son. Everything changed in the apartment, and it felt cozy again. I feel that a spirit, maybe a passed over family member or someone who used to be close to us, was trying to warn us, trying to scare us away from buying that house, letting us know that if we did, something bad was going to happen. We've never had another problem since, and we went on to buy a lovely house that's not haunted. Story 2. The swimming hole. I went to this favorite swimming hole of mine on the Skyhomish River. This is a very beautiful swimming hole, almost lagoon-like. The river flows with falls into a deep, colorful water. Under the water on one side are these huge flat rocks that drop off down to where you can't even see the bottom. The rocks have been carved into stairs that become flat, and then you go down to where the river wall is. Across the river, which is only about 50 feet or so, there are rocks where people can climb to. There's a rope swing tied to a tree. It's a very popular spot in the summer. And this brings me to my story. I was heading towards that spot when I noticed there were two people to the right of me, a man and a woman, sitting next to the rope swing, the other climbing up the rocks. And to the left of me was this little girl who was about 7 years old. She was about 3 feet away from me, on the edge of the rock, by the water, with her head turned slightly, just grinning at me. I'm still swimming, almost passing her, and I notice she's still smiling. So I smile and I wave at her, and I say hi. You know, you gotta be friendly on the water. She still smiles at me, but says nothing back. I look at her again, this time into her eyes. We had our eyes locked for a second, and that is when I noticed her eyes were very dark, to the point where I couldn't see her eye color. They looked like black holes, almost hollow-like in her head. Everything about this girl seemed perfectly normal, except for her eyes. She had a cute little neon swimsuit on, with little white flowers, and a ruffle around her waist. She had golden blonde hair that was shiny and came down past her shoulders. She was alone. There was no one above her or next to her. I was thinking that maybe she was standing there watching her mother swing from the rope. But as I swam a little bit past her, I suddenly turned to look back, because I feared her being too close to the edge, and I wanted to let her know that she should step back. As I turned around to do this, she was gone. There was no one else in the water. I hadn't heard a splash like she had jumped in. There was no way she could have climbed those rocks and gotten out of sight so quickly. There were a few other people standing around. Some of them had kids, but none of them looked like that little girl. None of them had golden blonde hair or that same neon bathing suit. I felt a cold chill come over me. Maybe I had a vision of some little girl falling into the water and drowning. I went and got a friend and told him all about it. And I just keep remembering those eyes. They were so dark and hollow-like, and that smile. She didn't move from the time I noticed her, swam towards her, and past her. She hadn't moved at all. What did I see? What was wrong with her eyes? Was she there to warn people about the rope swing or the water? Or was it something else? Story 3. Grandma's Rocker. Back when I was very young, I'm in my 50s now, I would sometimes spend the night with my grandparents. It was an old house that my grandfather and my great-grandfather had built themselves in the 1920s. One room that my great-grandmother had died in was always closed. It was left as it had been, and it was always so cold, even when it was so hot outside. I would sometimes see faces looking in the windows, and my grandmother would tell me that when you die, everything was the same, except you were with the other dead people now. When my grandpa died, I was offered some of his furniture. We were in my grandpa's room when the light on the wall clicked off. No one was near the light switch. My friend got so scared, he wouldn't go back into the house. We took several items, including a very old rocking chair that had belonged to my great-grandmother. For years after that, our lights would turn off by themselves. One night, my wife got up to use the bathroom and came back totally scared. She said the rocker was rocking by itself. I went and investigated and found it was in fact rocking. Thinking that maybe she hit it or bumped it or something, I stopped it, held it for a second, and then let go. And it started rocking more and more as soon as I let go of it. When I told my wife this, she came out, picked the rocker up, and threw it, breaking it. I took it to the garage after that, and we had no more trouble with the lights turning off or anything. So I guess Great Granny was attached to her rocker. Story 4. Tormented. When we first moved in, we were tormented. From banging on the walls to clanging radiators. Kept drumming everything up to the house being old and making peculiar old sounds. Till one day the dishes broke. Bricks started falling off the kitchen wall. And 2 of my 3 children sat up in bed simultaneously, speaking a strange language. After seeing this, I had the children all sleep with me, but the banging and clanging continued. After about 2 months of this, I was not only scared, but I was angry. We had nowhere else to go. We couldn't just get a new house. At the top of my lungs, I yelled to something, or anything. We're not going anywhere. This is our home, and you need to leave. The next few nights were quiet. And then I dreamed of a short man who spoke to me with a heavy accent. He explained who he was, and that this was his daughter's home, and he was upset that we were there. Upon waking in the morning, there was an unexplained 5x7 picture on our kitchen table. It was that same man I had dreamed about. Michael, the man in the picture and my dream, ended up becoming our protector through the years. And living in that house, my ability to talk to the deceased grew. This home has taught me lots. Michael has warned us of intruders on our property, and even saved our lives when the home next door went up in flames. He slapped me awake, and I was able to wake our children up. Many spirits have passed through, and perhaps because this home is near a radio station and across from a huge cemetery, it attracts many spirits. My communication with the other side is rather sharp. My children and grandchildren are safe with Michael presiding over the home. Not all ghosts and spirits are bad. Sometimes you just need to talk to them and find out what's really going on. I'd love to hear about them. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye. Well, thank you for listening to these stories. I hope you enjoyed them. In the last story, the person mentioned that they believe their house is so active because it's across from a radio station. I know I've mentioned this on our old podcast, and I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it here on YouTube. My dad worked in radio almost all my life. I've grown up in radio stations, and every single radio station he's worked in has been haunted. Very actively haunted. Do any of you all have stories about ghosts in radio stations? Have you ever worked in a radio station that was haunted? I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Bye.